Tonight, what was hidden behind the pulpit of one of America's most powerful churches finally came to light. At 66, Bishop T.D. Jakes broke his silence about something no one expected, the real reason his daughter, Sarah Jakes Roberts, stepped away from the spotlight. For months, people had been whispering, guessing, and creating stories, but the truth was far more complicated than anyone thought. You won't believe how deep it actually went. For years, Bishop T.D. Jakes had been known as a giant of faith, a man whose words healed hearts and whose sermons filled stadiums. He was respected, loved, and seen as untouchable. But even the strongest men faced storms that tested everything they stood for. And this time, that storm didn't come from the church or the world. It came from home. Let me tell you, when it started, no one saw it coming. People began to notice something strange. Sarah Jakes Roberts, one of the most beloved voices of modern faith, suddenly started pulling away from the public eye. She wasn't preaching as much. Her social media went quiet. Conferences that used to sell out were being postponed or canceled. At first, fans thought she was just taking a short break, but then weeks turned into months. That's when the rumors started spreading like wildfire. Some said she was burned out. Others said there was tension between her and her father. A few even claimed there was a secret disagreement within the Potter's House leadership. But here is the shocking part. Both Bishop Jakes and Sarah stayed completely silent. No statements, no interviews, just silence. And in the world of social media, silence was the loudest sound of all. This is where it gets interesting. People online began to fill the silence with their own stories. YouTube channels, gossip blogs, and podcasts started dropping inside information. They said Sarah couldn't handle the fame. They said there were personal struggles, emotional exhaustion, even spiritual conflicts, but no one really knew what was going on behind the scenes. Still, the more they guessed, the more mysterious it became. To understand why Sarah's silence shook so many people, we had to go back to where her story began. Long before the world called her Pastor Sarah, before Woman Evolve became a global movement, she was simply the teenage daughter of T.D. Jakes. And destiny took an unexpected turn when, at just 14 years old, Sarah became pregnant. That moment changed everything. The news made headlines, the criticism was harsh, and the church world wasn't kind. Some said her father's ministry would never recover from the shame. But T.D. Jakes didn't run from his daughter. He stood beside her publicly, teaching the world that grace was stronger than gossip. That moment could have broken her, but instead, it built her. It became the first test of her strength. From that point on, Sarah carried something invisible on her shoulders, the pressure to prove that she was more than her past, more than her mistake, and more than just the bishop's daughter. Every step she took, every sermon she preached, carried the weight of expectation. Let me tell you, people didn't just watch her. They measured her. As she grew older, she began to rise again. Her voice became powerful, her messages reached millions, and her ministry started to inspire women across the world. It looked like a beautiful redemption story, a girl who fell but rose again to become a leader of faith. But what people didn't see was how heavy that rise really was. While she was helping others find peace, she was struggling to keep her own. Behind her smile were sleepless nights, and behind her confidence was quiet exhaustion. The higher she climbed, the harder it became to breathe. This is how the story began to twist. The public saw a perfect picture, a confident preacher, a loving mother, a wife, a leader. But behind that stage light was a woman who was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, but the kind that came from caring too much for too long. You won't believe how deep that tiredness ran. Friends close to her noticed the signs: missed events, long pauses, fewer posts. Even her preaching tone changed. It became softer, more emotional, more vulnerable. The craziest part? No one really noticed what was happening until she started to disappear. And when she finally did, people thought it was sudden. But it wasn't. It was slow, quiet, and painful. It was a buildup of years of being watched, judged, expected, and praised all at once. And then something began to stir inside her father. Bishop Jakes, the man who spent decades preaching about strength and faith, could sense something in his daughter that words couldn't explain. A father's heart always knows. He saw the fatigue in her eyes. He heard the weariness in her voice. And deep down, he knew something was breaking. As weeks passed, the silence surrounding Sarah Jakes Roberts became impossible to ignore. Her followers were confused, her supporters worried, and her critics restless. People kept refreshing her Instagram, waiting for a sign, a post, a sermon, something. But nothing came, and that's when the noise began to grow louder. Podcasts started analyzing her every move. Blogs began to connect her silence to secret family issues, and YouTube videos with dramatic titles like "The Truth About Sarah Jakes Roberts" started getting millions of views. The world was searching for answers. But here is the shocking part. While everyone was talking, the Jakes family was listening in silence. Inside their world, things were more fragile than anyone realized. You see, being part of a family known worldwide for faith and leadership wasn't easy. Every decision, every emotion, every mistake was magnified. Sarah's role in the ministry had grown beyond what anyone could handle easily. She was pastoring beside her husband, leading conferences, writing books, managing social media, and still trying to be a mother and a wife. It was too much for one heart to carry. And slowly, that heart began to break under the pressure. Let me tell you, this wasn't just about ministry. This was about a woman who gave so much of herself to others that she forgot how to take care of herself. Behind the stage lights, behind the makeup and microphones, there was a quiet pain no one saw, late nights of tears, mornings of pretending everything was fine, and days when she stood before thousands, speaking strength while feeling empty inside. You won't believe how many times she wanted to stop but didn't, because stopping felt like failure. This is where it gets interesting. Bishop Jakes, who had always been the strong leader, started noticing subtle changes. He saw his daughter becoming quieter at family dinners, more distant during church events. He once mentioned in a sermon, "Sometimes strength hides behind silence." People thought it was just another powerful line, but it wasn't. It was his way of saying he saw what no one else did. As the pressure built, Sarah began questioning things she had never questioned before. Was she still doing what God called her to do, or was she simply performing what people expected of her? That thought haunted her. For years, she had been everyone's source of inspiration, but now she was the one searching for hope. Even her closest friends said her once fiery spirit had grown softer, more reflective. Some called it maturity, others sensed it was exhaustion. And then came the turning point, one that changed everything. During a quiet evening away from cameras and crowds, Sarah sat down with her father. The conversation was long and heavy. Tears were shed. And in that moment, a decision was made. It wasn't public yet, but it was real. Sarah decided to step back, not out of weakness, not out of defeat, but out of necessity. Destiny took an unexpected turn once again. But when she began to pull back officially, the world noticed instantly. And instead of empathy, what followed was noise, loud, chaotic, and unkind. Comment sections filled with theories, comparisons, and assumptions. Some said she was giving up. Others claimed she was clashing with church leadership. A few even accused her of being too modern for her father's ministry. Let me tell you, it was brutal. Still, both Sarah and Bishop Jakes stayed quiet. No defense, no denial, just silence. Because sometimes silence protects what words can destroy. Inside that silence, however, a deeper transformation was taking place. Bishop Jakes had always preached about endurance, but now he was learning about surrender. Watching his daughter struggle reminded him that even faith leaders aren't immune to pain. This is how it all began to unfold. Not as a public scandal, but as a private breaking point. Sarah wasn't running from her calling. She was trying to survive it. The more people demanded answers, the more she turned inward, searching for peace in the middle of chaos. And while the world debated, a quiet shift was happening in her heart and her father's. The man who once taught millions about standing tall was now watching the person he loved most learn how to rest. It was painful, but it was necessary. Because sometimes before destiny moves forward, it forces you to pause. And this pause, though silent and misunderstood, was about to reveal more truth than anyone was ready to hear. As Sarah quietly stepped back, the world couldn't stop watching. Fans noticed her absence, media outlets speculated endlessly, and social media exploded with questions. Where was Sarah Jakes Roberts? Why was she missing from events? Some even suggested there had been a serious conflict at the Potter's house. The rumors grew louder every day. But here is the shocking part. Nothing the world thought was true came close to what was actually happening behind closed doors. Inside her home, things were quiet but heavy. Bishop Jakes observed his daughter closely. He could see the exhaustion etched in her face, hear it in the faintness of her voice, and feel it in the silence of her laughter. It wasn't about fame or criticism or even ministry politics. It was about a woman who had been giving herself entirely to everyone else and had forgotten to care for herself. Let me tell you, it was a kind of struggle that no one could see but those who were truly close to her. Sarah had always been strong, bold, and confident. She had spoken to thousands, written books, and led conferences, but the higher she climbed, the heavier the expectations became. Every sermon she preached, every message she delivered, every appearance she made, it all carried an invisible weight. The world expected perfection, and for a while she had tried to give it, but even perfection has a breaking point. This is where it gets interesting. Her father had once said, "Sometimes God has to make you rest because you won't do it on your own." Those words now took on new meaning. Sarah's decision to step back wasn't sudden or reckless. It was a necessary pause. Destiny took an unexpected turn, forcing her to choose between relentless success and personal survival. And the craziest part, that choice came with its own heartbreak. Even as she withdrew, people continued to speculate. Some said she was burned out from ministry, others whispered about family tension, and a few even hinted at hidden scandals. None of it was true. What people didn't understand was that Sarah's struggle wasn't a story of scandal. It was a story of human endurance, of the invisible battles carried by those the world sees as strong. Bishop Jakes realized that his daughter's choice wasn't failure, it was wisdom. For years, he had preached about enduring storms, about strength in adversity, but now he saw that even the strongest sometimes needed to step back. Let me tell you, seeing her make that decision was both painful and inspiring for him. It reminded him and the world that being called doesn't mean being invincible. Sarah's absence also revealed the hidden pressures of ministry life. She had spent years pouring herself into everyone else's lives, helping women heal, guiding church members, inspiring followers. But what people didn't see was the cost. Late nights, constant travel, endless planning, social media scrutiny, it all piled up quietly, invisibly. The emotional and spiritual strain was immense, and no amount of applause could replace rest and peace. And yet, through the silence and struggle, a subtle shift began. Sarah started to reclaim herself in small ways, moments with family, quiet reflection, time for prayer and healing. Bishop Jakes watched, silently proud. This was not the end of her story. It was a turning point. What makes this story different is that it wasn't a public spectacle, a scandal, or a crisis. It was a deeply personal transformation. The world, however, was not ready to understand. Screenshots of her canceled appearances, quiet social media, and missed events fueled endless speculation. But while the public saw absence, her family saw courage. They saw a daughter and a father navigating a storm that no one else could measure. And that courage would soon reveal a truth that no one expected. Because even as people guessed, whispered, and assumed, Sarah's story was quietly rewriting itself. The pressures she faced were not signs of weakness. They were signs of a human being learning to honor her limits, to respect her soul, and to protect her purpose. This pause, this step back, was not defeat. It was preparation for something greater, something the world would only fully understand in time. Finally, after months of silence and speculation, Bishop T.D. Jakes decided to speak. What he revealed left everyone stunned. He shared the truth about his daughter's decision, and it was far from what the world had imagined. It wasn't scandal, it wasn't conflict, and it certainly wasn't failure. It was about survival, healing, and preserving the calling God had given her. You won't believe the depth of what he said. He explained that even the most anointed, even the most dedicated, need time to rest, reflect, and recover. He spoke about the invisible weight of ministry, the late nights, the constant traveling, the pressure to always be perfect, to always have answers, to always inspire. And he admitted, with a father's vulnerability, that he had seen his daughter carrying more than anyone could bear alone. You can be called and still need to heal, he said. Those words resonated not just with the congregation, but with anyone who had ever felt overwhelmed by expectations. Let me tell you, that moment changed how people saw both Sarah and Bishop Jakes. And then came the most powerful part. He revealed that Sarah's step back wasn't a moment of weakness, it was a divine interruption. Destiny took an unexpected turn, guiding her to pause before burnout could take everything. What makes this story different is that it wasn't a story of collapse. It was a story of intentional rest, of trusting God, even when the world doesn't understand your choices. The father's confession showed the world that true strength sometimes looks like stepping away, not pushing forward. As the truth settled, the reaction from the world began to shift. People began to understand that Sarah's choice was not the end, it was a beginning. Her ministry, her voice, and her purpose remained intact, only stronger because it had been protected. The craziest part, this moment of silence, pain, and reflection made her message even more powerful. Her authenticity, her willingness to be human, resonated with people who had been silently struggling themselves. Through all of this, the bond between father and daughter became clearer than ever. Bishop Jakes' love and wisdom guided Sarah through her struggle. His support reminded the world that family matters more than public opinion, that grace is stronger than judgment, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to pause. And Sarah, in taking that step back, showed millions that even in the middle of success, even in the face of pressure and expectation, it's okay to honor your own heart. The story didn't end with controversy or gossip. It ended with a lesson in faith, resilience, and love. Sarah didn't disappear. She transformed. She didn't quit. She prepared herself to rise even higher. And Bishop Jakes, the man who had spent decades preaching about endurance, learned once again the importance of listening, seeing, and loving with patience. And as the world slowly understood the truth, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a story about a preacher's daughter. It was a story about humanity, about the invisible battles we all face, and about the quiet courage it takes to step back and protect what matters most. Let me tell you, no one expected it, but this moment will be remembered for years. It showed that even in the spotlight, even under the heaviest expectations, faith, family, and self-care can guide you through the storms of life. Because in the end, Sarah Jakes Roberts didn't just take a break from ministry, she reminded the world that purpose is preserved when we honor our hearts, and strength shines brightest when we choose rest. And that truth, shared by a father and daughter, changed everything. This is where the story truly ends, leaving a lesson that will stay with everyone who heard it. Even the strongest need time to heal, and even the most visible lives are quietly human.